Welcome to the Precision Teaching Podcast. I am Rick Cabina, along with Doug Kostowitz.
Howdy ho.
Here we are, Doug. Another month, another conversation. How have you been?
I've been well. It's still been extremely too hot, but I know as soon as I say that, it'll be winter and it'll be too cold. So
yeah. Well, the fall's coming up. That's kind of in between.
That's just dominated by football, so.
True. So that means you'll be down in your basement and you won't see the weather, period.
Exactly. Once I get done with mowing the lawn, I'll be in the basement, so.
Well, Doug, we have, as usual, another great show for our folks tonight. And I'd like to start off with an announcement. And the announcement is the Precision Teaching Conference that's coming up in, when is it? It's in November.
Mm-hmm.
They have extended the deadlines to the 15th of August. So for those people that are considering going to the Precision Teaching Podcast, see, I just can't get it out of my head. It's always there. Any of you people thinking about going to the Precision Teaching Conference, which we call IPTC, International Precision Teaching Conference, you still have time to submit your proposal. This year it's out in Seattle, the lovely city of Seattle, and put your stuff forward, go to the conference, enjoy some salmon, go to the original Starbucks, have a great time.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Do you have any announcements?
Do I have any announcements? I do not have any announcements today. I did not come prepared for any announcements, so I'm announcement free.
Okay. Well, let's go into our email question. I received a recent email question, a nice short one that says, "Hi, Rick. This is part commentary and part question. If PT is so effective, why don't more people use it?" And this is from Ed in Toronto. I think this might be the second email we've gotten from someone from Toronto. Is that correct?
I was just going to say, we have been staying international for a while. I like it. But, that doesn't mean everybody in the U.S. can't send questions, too. But I like the international trip that we take on this show.
Yeah. Well, Ed, this is a good question. When I think about this question, there's no easy, pat answer to this. This is one of those things that if you get a group of precision teachers together, each person's going to have maybe a different answer, maybe a radically different answer. I can say what I think, and you can speculate too. So let's start with you, Doug. What's your answer to this question?
Well, I'm going to take it from I'll take an education spin on it. So
okay.
Why is it not, if it's so effective, let's say with educational related behaviors, why isn't it used more often? And I think in that realm, the education community tends to be kind of ruled by the newest, greatest, fanciest innovation at the time, and as you know, precision teaching has been around for many years. There are teachers that use it and use it quite effectively. It's been shown to be effective in school districts. There are current school districts that are using it, but on the whole, I don't think that everybody's sort of in a reactionary mode in education. We got to fix it, got to try something different, and I just think that it's not on the sort of front of a lot of people's attention, so they see this new thing that comes out, they're going to try some new curriculum for reading, new curriculum for math, and what kind of losses perhaps the fluency development idea within there, or there's another way of developing fluency. So I don't think it's so much that people don't know that it's effective. I just don't think it's the most new, the coolest looking curriculum with the pretty pictures and the neat videos. Not to say we can't do that, but I think that's why it isn't necessarily used, and not all people in the educational community tend to look for the scientific results or the data surrounding their choice of curriculum or choice of interventions.
Really?
I know that might surprise you and those of you who are listening, but that second half could come into play also. But I don't think that's the driving factor. I think the driving factor is, hey, it's the newest, greatest, fanciest thing, and sort of let's try this for 2 years. Oops, it didn't work. Let's try the newest, fanciest, greatest thing again. And so some things are lost in the shuffle.
Mm-hmm. That's a good answer. When I think about this question, I tend to come at it from a systems perspective. And how does a system which we're part of, and also a behavioral perspective, how does that work together? Number one, and of course, when we talk about a systems issue, I can't help but include some of what you said. This question, I'm assuming, takes or derives in part from, or contextually being in education. So if PT is so effective in education, why aren't more teachers and schools using it? I suppose we could also ask this question in other areas, but it is precision teaching, and it's mostly used in education, though it's used in other ways, but let's just attack it from that perspective. You look at, you made a lot of good points, but if we look at what are people selling in terms of where are the monies going from, if you're a principal of a school, an administrator, or if you're some type of big time publisher, where is your money? There are things out there like Dibbles. Dibbles has a great product and curriculum-based measurement. You can see how people are spending dollars there. So it's not as if they're not doing some of the things that could be done with precision teaching. They just happen to be doing these things elsewhere. So you have some competition out there. So that's going to be an issue. Other issues would be an individual teacher issue as part of the system. If you are an individual teacher, then it takes time. Well, before we get to using it, you have to understand how to use it. And if you understand how to use it, so it takes time to understand how to use it. Secondly, it takes, after you understand it, it takes time to use the system. It takes work. And maybe you're a teacher and you're really burdened and with other things, and picking up on precision teaching isn't at the top of your list, so to speak. Those are a few pretty big aspects of why aren't people using it. So just because something's effective, it doesn't mean people are going to jump on it and use it. I could add other things beyond just publishers, beyond a perceived or maybe a real response cost to using it. There's a technology that you have to learn, then you have to implement it. So I guess in thinking about summarizing this, just because something works doesn't mean people are going to use it. And if you look at a teacher and ask, what does he or she do all day? Adding precision teaching, you're going to need an administrator to support you. You're going to need materials. There's all types of things that you need to make that system work. It's a good question, and that's my quick take on it. There are probably others that would have different perspectives, and who knows, maybe if we polled enough people, we come to some type of consensus, and we probably have a lot of the reasons why precision teaching isn't used more widely. It is being used, and I see it being picked up in more places because of RTI. So there is hope out there, Ed. I am an eternal optimist, and I think we will see in our lifetime precision teaching picking up. So who knows? Maybe in a few years, it'll be a completely different situation.
I agree. I think the best point you made was there's a lot of people, there's a lot of opinions out there, but I think that the reasons that we both put forward would be held by others. So
let's move on to our science news.
Mm-hmm.
Our science news has to deal with the Behavior Analysis Certification Board, their 4th edition task list. For those of you who aren't involved in behavior analysis, we have a board which is called, we call it the BACB, that's the acronym, and they're a nonprofit entity, and their charge is to credential folks who are with behavior analysis, and they do all sorts of things. They work with some state governments and anyone who might use behavior analytics services. And they have a certification, and they have 2 levels. The one level, is it 2 levels or maybe 3 levels? I know they have the BCABA, then they have the BCBA, and I guess they also would have the BCBAD. So would that be 3 levels?
I think so, yes.
And that stands for, the BCBA stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. The BCBAB, well, I can't say that. It's a mouthful.
BCABA.
Thank you. ABA, just remember that, BC before it. That stands for Board Certified, what is it, Assistant Behavior Analyst or Associate?
Associate.
Okay, Associate.
I'm not sure. It's assistant or associate.
And then when you put the D suffix to it, the BCBA-D, that just stands for doctoral level BCBA. And this, the board becoming certified, depending on what state you live in, it's meaningful. It's not just a certification that you get and say, oh, this is nice, I'm going to put some letters behind my name. In our state, in Pennsylvania, there are certain jobs that they look for BCBAs and BCABAs, and if you don't have it, then you can't get that job. So in our state, in Pennsylvania, it means something. And the idea with getting certified is that you have some requisite or some knowledge that would show you understand the standards, not just the ethical standards, but you understand the science of behavior analysis. And again, if you're not familiar with behavior analysis, that's a science of behavior. And people that need help with behavior, any type of behavior, that's what behavior analysts do. Doug, you're a BCBA-D, right?
No, I never signed up for it. I haven't signed up for it yet.
Oh, you mean just the D part?
I'm just, BCBA.
Okay. So I'm the BCBA-D, and we're both credentialed with the Behavior Analysis Certification Board. And they have if any of you are interested in reading more about this, I don't want to spend too much time on going on about it, but if you type in BACB in Google, you'll come to the board, the Behavior Analysis Certification Board, and you can see what it takes to, there's a national registry that shows all the people who have their certification. There are different universities that provide training, so you can look at that. And of course, there's discipline guidelines, and if you do things that are inappropriate or unethical, you can have your certification pulled. I mean, I've seen that happen before.
Mm-hmm.
So the board is a way of, or the certification is a way of looking at behavior analysis and providing certain guidelines, and not just guidelines, but also at some level saying, hey, look, we have this body, and if you can do what it takes to be certified, then that means something. You're a person of a certain level versus anybody just saying, oh, yeah, you're going to give me some money? Sure, I'm a behavior analyst, when your background, when you don't even know who Skinner is.
Or you hate him.
Yeah, well, you hate them, exactly. So people, imagine that. People sometimes will do some crazy things for money. So
I think they've done a good job of oversight for the whole community. They've really brought it to the forefront, and I think that not only in Pennsylvania but across the country, there are agencies that actively seek out BCBA credentialed individuals. So I just wanted to add that to what you were saying.
Mm-hmm. And the thing that the board's grappling with now is licensure. I think the writing's on the wall, and probably, and if you think about other professions, speech therapists, they have a licensure, psychologists have a licensure, occupational therapists, counselors. When you have a licensure like that, then you can bill insurance companies, and of course now we can do that with our field. But once you're licensed, it brings it to a different level. So I think that's going to happen, but that's a conversation for another day. So getting back to this, when you get certified, you have to take a test, and this test, this comprehensive test, and boy, it's a long one. It has all types of different, for getting certification, all types of different tasks. They call it the task list. And these different task lists, they could cover all kinds of things. I'm trying to think off the top of my head.
They go through all the principles of behavior analysis, how to interpret data, how to take data, how to implement different behavioral interventions, looking at the environment. Then they go through all of the ethical and professional standards of safe conduct of individuals. They really cover many, many dimensions, and it's very step-by-step in how they look at every aspect. And so they present all these tasks that you need to do, and then on the test, they take a sampling of those tasks to verify the individual's knowledge before presenting certification. That's in conjunction with the classes that you already mentioned and requisite amount of hours of supervision, practicing behavior analysis.
Mm-hmm. They're up to, they have the 3rd edition task list, which is available on the BACB website, and there the tasks are broken down into content areas. So a content area could be, I'm looking at content area 3. This is from the 3rd edition. It's called Principles, Processes, and Concepts. Define and provide examples of behavior response class. Define and provide examples of stimulus and stimulus class, and so on. So here you can go through and look at all of the different tasks. Now, content area 7 is called displaying and interpreting behavioral data. And some of the tasks here, 7-3 is use standard acceleration charts for BCBA only, excluded for the BCABA. This is the 3rd edition. Now, here's the part of the news and why we included this. The 4th edition has just come out, so a lot of people are able to see this. And one of the things that they've done is they have removed using the standard acceleration chart as from the task list.
Mm-hmm.
And how did this happen is a question that probably some of you are asking. Well, that's a good question. And the way this works is, the way the board works, they have a group of what they call subject matter experts. The subject matter experts, I think they're elected, if I'm not mistaken. And the subject matter experts would be people who are obviously subject matter experts. So people who are in the field and are very knowledgeable about behavior analysis. What they do is they send out, they have a meeting, and then they send out things to respondents who are going to follow this task list. They ask them different questions, and some of those questions would be looking at the content areas and then having these rated. And the ratings could be, how useful is this, how often do you use it, and so on. And based on that information, ultimately that goes back to the 12 subject matter experts, and based on those responses, they have discussion, and then they retool the task list, and some things might come in, some things might go out. Based on the last time they did this, what went out was the standard acceleration chart. Other things come in and go out, but that's the one I'm highlighting because obviously that's of significance to the audience that's listening to this. My initial reaction when this happened is I was kind of pissed off, and I'm like, what? They're taking the standard acceleration chart out? How could they do that? And as I spent more time thinking about it, I became less angry, and I talked to people who were part of the board, and essentially what this reflects is how widely used and how important is the standard acceleration chart to behavior and analysis. And it would appear, based on this data, it's not widely used, which, frankly, I'm not shocked about that. And if it's not widely used, obviously that's going to be something that's not very important. Now, does that mean it's not important to people? Does that mean it's not an important tool? Does that in any way invalidate all of the many advantages standard acceleration charts have over non-standard equal interval graphs? Absolutely not. But even with that being the case, even though the standard acceleration chart is comparing it to a non-standard equal interval chart is like comparing, let me think of something really good. It's like comparing a jet aircraft to a hang glider. How's that sound?
I was going to say a bi-wing, but okay.
Okay, you go with bi-wing. Maybe that's a little better, because at least that's mechanical. Nevertheless, the getting back to the point of them taking it out, I can understand, because the more I think about it, we have behavior analysis is one hell of an effective science. And everything that they've done, they have used a lot of non-standard equal interval charts. And even though there's limitations with it, I'll tell you what, it's good, and it tells you things, and it can tell you, is what I'm doing working? And we've built the science on those non-standard equal interval charts. In the future, when we get more information out there and we show some comparisons to standard acceleration charts, and we also start, and people have done this, when more people make it publicly available, hey, if you rechart these articles and you rechart what these people are showing, you're going to see some different things. When that gets out there, then you'll see more people saying, the standard acceleration chart is useful, and then you might see it come back in. So, just in a nutshell, if I'm thinking about bringing this all together, I understand why it's done. I'm not particularly happy that it's done because it's a very important visual display, but it's been done, and what can you do about it other than raise awareness and show people through publications, show people through conferences? This is something that you might want to consider.
Yep, and that's about all you can do at this point.
Yeah. So, that's some science news for you. Maybe the next time the task list, and that's the one thing I didn't look up. I don't know how often these task lists are
changed.
I'm sure that information's on the website, but I didn't look at it. So if we're at the
let's do a quick estimate. They're not going into the fourth edition task list is not going to affect till 2015, right?
Yeah.
So that's the fourth edition doesn't start for another 5 years. So you figure it seems like every 5 years. So they started in 90, 95, or not 90, 2000, 2005, 2010 is the third edition, then 2015, something like maybe it's every 5 years.
Well, when did the board first start up? Was it in the 90s, I'm thinking?
I want to say, well, the first tests were either 99 or 2000.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I'm on the
So,
website. The Behavior Analyst is nonprofit established in 1998 to meet credentialing. The Behavior
and I
Analyst.
think they offered the first test. I actually met some of the people that were in that first test, and I think they said it was either 99 or 2000.
Okay.
We took the test in 2002.
Okay.
So we were under either the first or second test. Probably the first task list at that time.
Yeah. So with your math is right on the money. So that's within 15 years, and they're in the fourth one.
It's been 15 years, and you figure they had the first one to start with, so you figure every 5 years after that is roughly an approximate amount.
Yeah. Well, if any of you too feel passionate about the chart, there's a couple things you can do about it. Number one, you could send emails to folks on the board and voice your concern. And other things you can do, though, is also get out there, provide education to people, help us with recharting, and I think those would be valuable too.
Mm-hmm.
Probably more valuable than complaining to people.
Yeah.
But the complaining doesn't. That's good to know.
Complaining usually makes us feel better, not the person who's being complained to,
Yeah.
or the problem that's in discussion.
So true. So true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's our science news. Let's move on and talk about word our article review. This article review, I picked this article out because of our interview. We have an interview with Karen Pryor, and Karen Pryor is, when I think about shaping, this is what this article is on shaping, and I think about who do I know who is the best shaper that I know of, and I would say Karen Pryor. She has been doing shaping, among other things, but she has been doing this for years and with all types of different animals and people, and just where she's at with this is unbelievable. She has lots of books out there, but this article talks about shaping. And for those of you who haven't heard that term shaping before, what shaping refers to is a method of changing behavior. And the method uses what's called successive approximations. And successive approximation means that whatever your terminal behavior is, you are shaping that behavior so that you're reinforcing successive approximations or behavior that's closer to that terminal behavior. And this is a different way of teaching behavior. If I wanted to teach Doug something, like I wanted to teach him to fetch me some coffee, what I could do is I could be like, Doug, give me some coffee. And I could I could threaten you, or maybe I could say, hey, Doug, here's $5. If you get me some coffee, I'll give you this. Now, there's different inducements I could use, or maybe I somehow, in the morning, I use shaping where, using some subtle reinforcements that make you go over to the coffee machine and ultimately pour me a cup and bring me something.
Using differential reinforcement.
Yeah, exactly. This is a really cool way of teaching because there are no wrong responses, right? If you do something that is not the behavior that you're looking for, that successive approximation that now is going to be reinforced, then it just doesn't. If you differential reinforcement, as you said, it just doesn't get reinforced.
I think maybe, just for those, again, who haven't heard of shaping, a good way to think about it is you're thinking of stairs. You're looking for some some level of the behavior, moving towards something. But once that towards something is in the repertoire, you then move a little bit further toward, or you're now reaching for something. So then you move toward and reach. So that's what you're looking for. You're putting on extinction or ignoring everything else. So there's not a punishment. We're getting into all behavioral terms today. There's no aversive condition for, not like you said, the incorrect behaviors. There's only that reinforcement that's provided for each step along the way towards that terminal response.
I like that, Doug. That's good. This article that we have here today is called A Day of Great Illumination, B.F. Skinner's Discovery of Shaping. And what's fascinating about this article is the author is Gail Peterson, and she does a masterful job of detective work. I can just so appreciate what she did here, and looking at all the people she talked to, the different research, the different sources that she looked at, and she gets at when did Skinner actually do shaping himself, and what he talked about in his 38 book, which is The Behavior of Organisms. He talks about response differentiation by successive approximations. And in essence, he's talking about shaping here. But what she did is some really cool detective work, and this article is neat because it shows when Skinner was working in General Mills. So Skinner had a contract with the government. This was during wartime, and Skinner was using behavioral technology for looking at how could pigeons or other animals be used to help the war effort. And what she did with this article is she went through it and she looked at, well, when did Skinner really shape? Although he talked about it in 38, what she found out here through doing a lot of this evidence, or through looking at evidence, is that this probably happened in 43. 43 was the time, he was with his, what's really neat is they share letters, and all of the evidence that goes towards, okay, when did Skinner first do this, points to 1943.
Right.
And it's just very cool because the way this happened is, Skinner's hanging out with his friends, and lo and behold, they're messing around with pigeons, and they
wild pigeons just up on this rooftop.
Yeah,
not experimental pigeons, not in an experimental space, just up on a roof, hanging out, and they were just having fun.
Yes, and what they did is they shaped these pigeons by hand. And once Skinner shaped these pigeons by hand, it was a revelation for him. And there are times in people's careers where you can see major shifting points. And this was a significant point for Skinner, where when he saw how powerful this was, this had a very important effect on him. And of course, he wrote about shaping quite a bit and did a number of experiments after this happened. And if you think about 43, here's Skinner. He wrote Behavior of Organisms in 38. So 43, this is the nascence of behavior analysis. Skinner's there with some people who are just learning about operant technology, and just imagine all of the wonderful discoveries that were occurring. But again, in 43, this Skinner with his students using this free-form shaping, that apparently this is when it happened, based on all of Peterson's research.
I really like how the author pulls that that moment in time and highlights that he says it just amazed him that he could do it. And the only her kind of take on it is up until that time he never handshaked any of the animals. Everything was shaped mechanically. They were put into the box, and it was up to the pressing of the dot or moving towards the dot that the actual mechanical shaping was done by the external safety, not by Skinner himself. So when he did this, and then the note that it actually moved one of his students fully in the direction of commercial production of behavior rather than pursuing his promising career in psychology.
Yeah. And it's neat to think of, you can make a living by affecting behavior. And of course, with animals, I mean, certainly you can make a living working with humans, but, well, just in general, you can make a living if you're good at it. A good living, and lots of people do it, as a matter of fact. I guess I shouldn't say that's not anything surprising, because people have been doing that for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not in that world, it's always neat to think of, wow, here's this technology, and it's so clear, and it works so well. With humans, sometimes people don't see it that way, but technology works, the science works the same on both of us. Anything else jump out at you reading this article?
The letter to Miss Peggy Schrader. What I found interesting was the detective work that this author put together, seeing the letter from a student who found this reference in 65 back to 43, and to actually wrote the letter to him. It's enclosed in the article, and then he responded and said, "Yeah, it was the first time," and I've included the response. To get a letter back from Skinner would have been great, especially just a student that kind of connected the dots, and then here we are in 2004 reading someone who connected those dots 40 years after that. So I just thought that whole process was excellent. I mean, shaping is things that I've known about for years and years, and for someone to actually discuss it first and then not use it for 5 years and then be so amazed about it was just fantastic.
Yeah, that was an undergraduate. She must have earned extra points to be able to figure that out. The one thing that I thought was really cool about this, and there's probably 20 things I can talk about that were really cool about this, but Peterson says, but it is one thing for a phenomenon to occur in nature, be observed, and even be exploited deliberately, and quite another for it to be recognized as something of fundamental scientific significance. That's something that scientists do, and that's what Skinner did, and that's one of the reasons why he was a genius. Doug, we could go on and talk about this article for another hour. Let's turn this show over to our guest tonight. We have an interview with Karen Pryor, and without further me bantering, let's go on to the interview. I would like to welcome Karen Pryor to the Precision Teaching Podcast. Karen, welcome.
Hi, Rick. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you here today, and I always like to start off my podcast interview with getting a little sense of the background of the people we're interviewing. So most of the people I talk with are precision teachers, and I think it's fair to say that you have a very long history with precision teaching. So maybe you could just talk about your background, what you've done, and how you have been involved with precision teaching, or maybe better said, how you've been involved with OG and the things that you two have done together.
Oh, well, let me think about that. I guess I should set the record straight here. I'm really not a precision teacher in that I've never done that professionally. My interest has always been in operant conditioning and reinforcement shaping, developing behavior using the principles that came out of B.F. Skinner's lab back in the 50s, 40s, 30s. Using these underlying facts about how animals learn. And I first met Og, I think it was May 14th, May 16th, and it would have been in the early 90s. It was an ABBA conference in San Francisco, and I had been invited by Phil Heinlein to give the President's Invited Scholars Address at that conference. I had published a book called Don't Shoot the Dog, which was my attempt to explain how the principles of reinforcement, that's what we want to call them, how operant conditioning most particularly reflects how we can use those principles in our own daily lives. The book was not about dogs at all, it was about people. And Phil found it interesting, and he asked me to come and speak. And I made a deal with him. I said, yes, I would love to, and I'm honored, of course, but I would like something in return. At this point, there hadn't been wide use of these principles with animals, and at this point, I was very involved in taking the principles to the general animal training community. So I wanted to show not just the precision teachers, but all of ABBA. I wanted people to have a chance to see what we were doing with what I considered to be their science. So I asked Phil for permission to give a panel discussion and have, maybe there were 4 of us, present our work, do some demonstrations and show some videos of what we were beginning to do in the early 90s outside of the field where I first learned operant conditioning, which was marine mammal training. So anyway, we had the panel discussion. It was a lot of fun. The place was jammed, standing room only, and that's where I first met Og. He got up in the panel during our discussion and told his famous donkey story of how he trained his donkey to open the mailbox, I think, and some others as well. And so we became friends on the spot and remained in touch, I think, really for the rest of his life. Og, of course, explained to me the principles behind the methodology of precision teaching. And I took a workshop at another ABBA session with Og teaching so that I would learn something about charting. And I did learn something about charting and something about precision teaching and precision teachers. And I've also visited some of the schools, and I worked with Myrna Libby at the New England Center for then the New England Center for Autism. And then again, I did some work with Joe Morrow at his schools in California. All of which left me extremely impressed with precision teaching as a tool and with the way it does get the information across, but also very conscious of the fact that we had another set of tools that somewhat overlapped. And so most of what I've done directly involved with precision teaching has been kind of swapping methods, looking at how to combine what we do, operant conditioning, especially using a marker, a conditioned reinforcer as information, with what precision teaching brings to the table, merging the two if possible. And I guess we've had some success there. So,
You're being humble.
Well, that's my connection with precision teaching.
Okay.
But I would say one more thing. I have an enormous sympathy for everybody in precision teaching because it is hard to understand why the entire world doesn't teach the way we teach. Right?
Absolutely.
It has been a long, bloody, and discouraging battle. It's sort of a Tea Party battle, isn't it? It's as if the education system does not let facts get in the way of doing what they want to do, whatever that might be.
That is so true. I want to ask you, was that meeting that you were talking about, did that happen to be in 1993 at the Chicago ABA?
No, the first meeting of all?
Yeah.
I think it would have been 92 at the San Francisco.
Ah, okay. Because my very first conference that I ever went to was 1993, and that was the one in Chicago. And to this day, I can say this, there hasn't been a better symposium, but it was on shaping, and you were there, Og was there, and there were other people who were there. I can't remember who else was there, but that was the best panel or symposium that I had ever been to. It was just phenomenal.
Well, that's good to know. I wonder, I think from then on, we dolphin trainers managed to get ourselves to ABA every year for quite a while. So that may have been just the first thing that we did the following year. Now, I know that the first one that I got organized happened in San Francisco. But then after that, I know I was in Chicago, and we just could have easily put on a shaping panel, have some great dolphin trainers in Chicago that we could have rustled up too. Ever since then, in fact, there have been animal trainers presenting at ABA, trying to expand the awareness of what we do with our nonverbal learners with the same principles.
Well, that's a nice transition. Your most recent book is Reaching the Animal Mind, which I'm probably preaching to the choir with the audience, because these are a lot of people who are interested in behavioral technology, but the book is just absolutely wonderful, and I'd like to ask you some questions about it, if I may.
Well, fine. I'm very interested. If you think it's wonderful, I'm happy to answer questions. No, I'm joking.
Your comments about, number one, people not using effective educational technology, that's the same thing that I'm sure you could say working in an animal world. Would you agree with that?
Oh yes, I would. We fight the same battle in the animal world. Absolutely.
I'm curious to your opinion on why does that exist? Why is there this push against? Sometimes it literally is against effective behavioral technology. Other times it's just because of ignorance, because people don't know.
I think it's threatening. I think probably in both the schoolroom and the horse training ring or out in the dog world or whatever, we have a traditional system for teaching, for changing behavior, adding instruction. That system goes back as long as language. It goes back as long as we've been human. We've been developing the traditions. This is how you teach. This is how you train animals. And those methods, whatever has evolved, it works. It works, or it wouldn't be done, that way. But when you develop things by trial and error without really understanding the underlying causes, of course, what happens as in all traditional skills, artisanal skills or whatever, you tend to bring along a lot of superstitious behavior. If you don't really know why it works, then you can't be sure which part of what you do is vital. And so it all becomes vital. And you learn it by tradition, you learn it by apprenticeship, you do it the same way it's always been done. And it's usually fairly successful, right? Most of the people learn something, most of the animals become tolerably obedient, or even if they don't, you get rid of them, and if the children that don't learn get flunked out of the school, and that's a system that has worked for 10,000 years, 20,000 years. Why should we now change it? It's especially true for the people who make their livings doing that. They're doing it. As far as they're concerned, it works well enough. They worked very hard to acquire this set of they had long apprenticeships to learn what they're doing, and they defend their ideas and their techniques as if they were an animal defending territory, you know. When you come up and say, hey, I have a better way that you don't understand, too bad for you, I'll be glad to explain it to you, and meanwhile this works much, much better, you're putting them in extinction. You know, everything that they knew, there's suddenly this feeling that maybe it's not as good as it was, and it's something else is better, and oh my God. What I did, you know, I always just, well, the experience of being in an extinction curve is that what you did know isn't working anymore. And animals, when you put them in that position, have a big emotional reaction. Anger, despair, if you carry it far enough, you know. It's a bad place to be, and that makes people mad and very defensive. And I think that's what happens. We're dealing with something so intangible. You know, if it were a piece of equipment, you could put in front of them and say, "Look, this automated thing works a lot better than that wheelbarrow you were using." You can say, "Oh yeah, I see that. Okay, give me that thing." You don't have to go through. Well, we're trying to give them the technology, which is what I think it is. That we're trying to give people. It's very intangible, so they don't even want to try starting to learn it. I think it's just the extinction problem, and that makes them not only unwilling to learn it, but angry at it and us.
I'll ask you a question about a basic question. How would you define clicker training?
Well, clicker training is just a dog trainer's nickname. It splashed onto the internet and caught on for operant conditioning with positive reinforcement and a marker. And I picked that word marker from Og Lindsley. He was the one who coined the term event marker for a conditioned reinforcer, established as a conditioned secondary reinforcer used to identify the behavior you're reinforcing. That was Og's invention. And God bless him for it, because for a long time there's been no word. There's been no word in the Skinnerian lexicon for that specific tool. And that tool is really the basic element of what we do with animals and what we teach.
So
is that marker. That's the key.
In the marker, could be the clicker, it could be anything, actually.
It can be anything that fits the criteria. A good marker signal has to be brief so that you don't mark a whole sloppy bunch of stuff, so that you can pinpoint one specific little aspect of what you want. It has to be different from all the normal things in the environment. So it has to be stand out from the rest of the stimuli in the environment. It has to be something that both the teacher and the learner can perceive. And sometimes that's not easy to spot. You may not realize that the person you're dealing with doesn't have good hearing or something. You know, so it has to be perceptible to both. And it needs to be initially a neutral stimulus, so that you can cleanly make the Pavlovian association with the desired outcome, whatever that might be, the reinforcer, and not bring into the picture any possible other baggage. That's why words make very poor markers. Human words. And it's difficult to persuade people beforehand that just saying yes or good job is a good marker. But once they try using a marker instead of that word, whatever it was, the difference is so quickly apparent, and then most people will change over. So that's clicker training is one name for shaping behavior with positive reinforcement and a marker, and shaping operant behavior, not unconscious, classically conditioned behavior.
So the big technique that you're using there is shaping. And In terms of, I think I could say this safely that I'm talking to probably the world expert when it comes to shaping. Even in our field, people know about shaping, but certainly, it's sometimes hit or miss how often people will use shaping. Oftentimes in educational settings, there's lots of prompting scenarios that are used.
You bet.
But people just don't see, I don't know, again, what it is. If it's they don't understand that shaping could be used in these situations, or they don't know how.
Both of those, I think. And again, remember, we're primates, and we tend to solve every problem first in the way that we would solve it as the animal that we are. So it's if you'll pardon the expression, only natural for us
Sure.
to try to get behavior to change by pushing and pulling on it, so to speak, by telling them what to do and then praising, by making them do it, leading them through it, and then reinforcing. There's a whole school of dog training now that people are trying to move away from the traditional avoidance conditioning, punishment-based training. There's a whole school called Lure and Reward, which is essentially prompting and paying for.
Lure?
Whatever you...
Is that
Lure, L-U-R-E.
Lure, oh, gotcha.
Lure. Stick a piece of food in front of the dog's nose and lead it to where you want it to go or into the position you want it to have, and then give it the food. That teaches the dog nothing, except hang around, be nice, and sometimes they'll feed you. And follow the food wherever the food goes. But, it doesn't notice, so to speak, that it is. Eventually, you will be able to teach the dog whatever you need. And it's the same thing with the prompting and directing. You may get the behavior, and I've seen this with children, which is why I'm going over it again. You may get the behavior just fine without the child ever really having any idea what it's supposed to be doing. And this is very clear with the dogs too. Sure, they go over the bridge and into the elevator and out again, but they don't. They aren't. It's not operant behavior. They're not saying, "Hey, watch me. I can make this person click. Watch. I know what to do here," and then they do it. They don't have that awareness because you're kind of doing all that for them. So yeah, there is an alternative to that, and that is capturing the behavior with a marker and shaping it incrementally. Rick, the last 2 chapters in Reaching the Animal Mind are about using this technology. There are techniques within the technology. The technology really is the applied science. Mm-hmm. Using the technology with people. And we at present at least call that tag teaching, which is, again, a kind of evolved name that came out of the sports world. That sound of the clicker is also, with people, is called a tag or a tagger. Mm-hmm. It's a marker. But you can't call it clicker with people because parents particularly objected to treating my child like a dog.
Yes.
So we invented another term. And the parents, it comes up again. It's not clicker training. This is tag teaching. It's different. It's a new way to teach ice skating or tennis or whatever you're doing. Tag teaching, say the parents. That's nice. So anyway, it has a slightly different name. There, in tag teaching, I think we've gotten more and more aware of the difference between instructing and breaking behavior down. The key to shaping and the key to tag teaching is look at how many elements there are in the end product that you want and then break them down into little pieces, starting with a piece that the person can already do. And you reinforce that and you pay for that. And then if your learner is verbal, you can say, okay, the next thing I'm going to tag for is feet together. You tag that 2 or 3 times, and the feet are together. The interesting thing is that it is essentially still a nonverbal process, because the body, you tag a bunch of different things and suddenly you have a child in a beautiful handstand. Or we did one in the office one day. One of the folks in my company office is a sports coach, and we gave him the challenge of teaching all of us females how to stop throwing a ball like a girl. Yeah. And he broke that down into 5 different steps, not too difficult at all. The first tag point is how to hold the ball with 3 fingers. And you take the ball and you click, and you take the ball and you hold it, and he clicks if it's right, and you take the ball again. You have your fingers actually do that 3 times, and the 4th time, boy, you'll just automatically remember, your body will remember that. And the next one is ball behind your ear. And I can't remember the others, but we all learned to throw. Me too. We don't always think of that, but that's the key to shaping, is catching little pieces one at a time, and it's also the key to developing a behavior, even if you are going to instruct it verbally. The interesting thing about using the marker there is that the body learns in 3 tries all those little pieces, and then you've got the whole thing in about 4 minutes.
Wow.
That person has learned how to throw the ball like a boy instead of a girl, let us say, and the body remembers that because of that little message to the nervous system. So it really is something different.
Now, what's different about this is you would be, if you were working with the dog, you click, and then that click's going to be followed up by a reinforcer.
Right.
But in this instance, you're just clicking.
Yes.
So
yes. Go on.
I was going to ask, what's the difference there? What's happening?
When you start at the very beginning, you need to convince the primitive part of the brain that there's something going on here that is worth paying attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might start with silver dollars or chocolates or something that organism is going to want badly enough to pay attention. Quarters, tokens, beads, with little children and with skeptical adults. We often start with a tangible backup reinforcer, a real thing. Once the person discovers that, first of all, they can make you click by doing things consciously, and secondly, that they're successful at it, and they're doing things that they didn't know how to do before, the success becomes the primary reinforcer. The fact that you're getting it becomes the reinforcer. You really don't need more than that once you've gotten them over the hump of wondering, of either ignoring it or resisting it. And again, that's kind of a nonverbal thing. You know, they have to experience the reinforcers in their hot little hands. We often use candy just because it's handy and it comes wrapped up, and people say, well, I don't eat chocolate. And that's fine. You get it anyway and you give it to your friends. That's all sort of head-tripping resistance. Once it's over with humans, you hardly need much in the way of a backup reinforcer. They're excited to learn the thing, whatever it is.
Experience that quite a bit, where when people actually see this is how you do things, it's like a revelation that people have. Like, wow, this is completely different than anything I've ever done before.
Absolutely. We have a certification program that the company built just for dog trainers who teach pet manner classes to the general public. That's one little niche. But they are the ones who are on the front lines of having people go, oh my God, this is so wonderful. I can't believe it. I never heard, they see that. They see that all the time. And that's very reinforcing for the teacher. Mm-hmm. When some previously skeptical human being with some crazy off-the-wall dog is suddenly the dog is taking control of its own behavior, and the people are in charge of what that behavior would be, and they're all thrilled to pieces. Dogs too. It's very sweet. It's moving.
With all the shaping that you've seen done, how long generally would you say a shaping procedure takes?
Well, it's hard to say because, you might be shaping some very complicated things that really will take. You're shaping a ballet dancer. There's like 50 or 100 little behaviors, and inside those behaviors, there's other little behaviors, and developing, that's years of just many different little kinds of shaping. If you're not making progress in 4 or 5 clicks, you didn't break it down far enough, that's all. So you want to be steadily making progress, but in very small increments. And if your learner is not progressing, then, this is like the charts. If you're not progressing, then you go, got something it's not working. We got to go back and either build it smaller or reinforce something different or look at it in another way. So it's always instantaneous, but how long and how far you're going to carry it, that's unanswerable. I don't know.
That makes sense. The task could be something like turning the knob on a door handle versus, ballet, as you point out. Those are definitely 2 levels of complexity that are widely different.
Yeah, but and the door handle, that can be a tricky one because a person might not know how to rotate her wrist. There's a story and you don't know that until you get into it. And then you find you've got more problems here, more behaviors you have to pre-train to get to the door handle rotating thing. There's a story in Reaching the Animal Mind about a child that I worked with at the New England Center. I think you'll remember it. We were trying to shape a behavior that was a nuisance. She didn't clear her plate after eating. 14, nonverbal, at least quite as far as we knew. Some passive language, but receptive language. She had a little. And she wouldn't clear her plate, and they'd been trying to do it for years, and she didn't catch on. And so we tried it we mocked it up with 2 tables and a chair and have her pick up the plate and take it to the next table. And then we moved, and she did that, and that worked great, click and treat. But then we moved the table, and she went to the place where the table had been instead of to the table, and walked through it, as it were, and put her plate down on the next thing that looked like a table, which was a bookcase. And it turned out what was missing was the habit that we all take for granted of looking around the room. When we don't see what we want and expect to see right in front of us, we look around. But she didn't have that habit. So when we shaped the behavior of looking around by I picked up a wastebasket and clicked it for looking at it while it was being put in different places. And then she got it about the table. So, it was very exciting. And it is one of the fun things about shaping. It's much more than a tool. It's an art form, too. It's an exploring thing that, not everybody loves to do that. It's not everybody's idea of fun. But if it is your idea of fun, it's a lot of fun. Can I suggest something else, though, I think that is crucial to this technology and that we don't think about very clearly when we're working with people sometimes. We get foxed with people because we have such faith in our verbal language. But for a very long time, I really did think what we did with the dolphins and what we are doing when we talk about click training, that shaping was the essence of it, but there is another thing that's the essence, and that is the discriminative stimulus that identifies the behavior. We call that a cue to differentiate it from a command, because it's not a command. There's no threat involved. If you didn't do what the cue was for, you just missed an opportunity for reinforcement. But those cues, which can be a hand signal or the smell of bacon in the air that gets you out of bed in the morning. It can be a million things. The environment is full of these. They are also conditioned stimuli. They are also conditioned reinforcers. that's turned out to be a world of fun digging into and very crucial to making this whole thing work. So we don't use S deltas.
Just SDs.
Just SDs.
Mm-hmm.
S deltas are what we call the wrong signal. You know, that it is very difficult to avoid turning that into a punishment. And we try that. That's another whole big can of worms for the people who use a correction routinely. In fact, many learners come to expect it. Why don't you tell me when I'm wrong so I'll know when I'm right? So I spent a lot of time on that in the book. It's I think really what's at play there is the nervous system itself. Because when you are in the pathway in the brain for seeking reinforcement and getting reinforced, you are not in the pathway for avoiding trouble. So as soon as you start being careful not to make a mistake, you are in the avoiding trouble pathway. You're waiting for conditioned warning signals. You're trying to stay out of trouble. It's actually literally a different part of even though both go through the amygdala, a very old part of the brain, it's a different part of the system. It's a different loop.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to stay out of the avoid punishment trouble loop altogether if we are trying to teach something in the acquire reinforcement loop. They're incompatible, and it just gets in your way.
You probably have...
It does.
Keep
Go
going.
on.
We're going to talk over every now and then because of the delay,
Yeah,
so please
sure.
keep going.
No, go on. That's all. I want to know what you want to say about that. Go on.
Well, that is, it makes so much sense on a number of levels to me, and what resonates with me is what you're saying is, and I know you've probably dealt with this a lot, but how do you respond? I mean, that's one level of saying, why shouldn't we use punishment? Because there are people you'll run across that think punishment is a very acceptable way of doing business.
Oh, absolutely. And most traditional trainers think, why would you possibly give it up? Because it's so quick and immediate and stops bad behavior. And why would you throw that away? Well, I think there's some confusion. I really do. I think people lump different kinds of things together. When I'm saying, that we try to stay out of the punishment loop there because of the brain function, that's during the training. When we're trying to teach, it doesn't mean that I won't say, stop that this instant, come in here. If something's going on that I don't want to have happen, let's go to dogs instead of children. If the dog is eyeing the cheese and crackers on the coffee table, I may warn the dog not to touch that. But that's not, I may in fact abash the dog, and you'll see, that what we think of as guilt, but it's really just anxiety that now I'm in trouble, now she's mad at me. That face on the dog, I wouldn't want to see that if I were trying to teach the dog something. I would consider I'd made a mistake if I saw it then. But there are two things operating here. One is that the minute I leave the room, that dog's going to go for the cheese. I know that. I'm not successfully teaching the dog not to touch the cheese and crackers. I'm just trying to interrupt it while I'm present. In fact, probably until I can get over there and put the cheese and crackers on something higher. A lot of times we have to invade a situation and stop it from happening physically because somebody's going to get hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
The dog's running around loose in the street. I've got to catch it before it gets run over. And those are management situations. That's not a training opportunity. You have to stop this. You have to put the dog in the crate. You have to protect the child from its own actions. You have to do something physical to interrupt the behavior and protect the environment, the child, and anybody else around from getting hurt before you do anything else. That's not training. It's just management. It's necessary. We put horses in barns. We put birds in cages. If I have an aggressive rooster in my chicken flock, I'm going to be careful around that rooster. I'm either going to confine him or carry an umbrella or something when I go in the chicken pen. Most likely he'll end up in the pot anyway. None of those are teaching situations, and yet they do run up. We do have to manage things now and then. And what we do when we manage, when we stop the behavior from happening, may or may not be aversive to the person or the animal. It may or may not. We can't predict that. We can assume they didn't want to be held by the collar, they didn't want to be put in isolation, whatever we did, they didn't want it. But it's not a punishment in that it's not going to stop the behavior in the future. And we can't help that. It's when you're teaching, the assumption that because we have to do something which may seem aversive to stop and interrupt this thing that's going on, we should also do that when the person curses or when the dog barks or some minor thing goes on. We're also right to use punishment to stop it, to teach them not to do that again. That's where I think all of that's where the mistakes are. We might use management to stop something. We won't use punishment to try to teach something.
The book that you have, that you've just written, Reaching the Animal Mind, this Switching Gears, you have an excellent chapter on creativity. And in fact, I wrote a paper on creativity, and I cited your 1969 paper. I wonder if you could talk to the audience a little bit about creativity. And how can you make it, or maybe I left that a little too wide open.
Yeah. Creativity is the ability to come up with novel behavior, novel solutions. It's something we used to think was restricted to human beings. Turns out, wrong again. And probably, I used to be kind of a snob about these things. I used to think that, well, it's amazing. It was amazing the first time we did it with the dolphins, taught them the criterion that you will only be reinforced for something you have not previously been reinforced for. You need an animal with a big history of reinforcement and many different reinforced behaviors to teach this criterion. And the animal needs to be prepared. And I think that's true for human beings, too. The more chances you have to get reinforced for different things, the more plasticity you have in your behavior to come up with more new different things that you've initiated, not just things that have been shaped by others. And that's what we call creativity. I used to think that, well, dolphins fine, and I'm sure you could do it with elephants and bigger, some of the more advanced primates, but, I thought you couldn't do it. You can do it all the way down. Right this summer, I'm playing with some neuroscience students at Harvard, and we're going to see if we can't develop some ordinary lab rats that can invent their own behaviors. We're going to see what we can do with that, and I feel pretty sure that the rats will be able to come up with something once they have learned at least 3 or 4 other behaviors through the shaping and capturing process. Then I think if they expect it, they're in this situation, and you're not clicking anything, and you click the first thing they do that's different, I think we'll be able to explain to them that different is the thing, new, and see if they can. I think they'll be able to do that. So, creativity is a byproduct of a rich environment and a lot of different opportunities to get reinforced. The reason I'm kind of hesitating is that there is the other element, and that was apparent in those initial dolphins that we did the Navy experiment with, and that is some organisms are more creative than other organisms, and that's also a fact. And that you can make them both creative, but you can make them both conscious of a need to innovate, but some of them will be a lot better at innovating and innovate much more innovative things than others. There's a great big normal curve there. And that I think it comes in the package with the individual, and I bet that's going to be true for rats too.
Well, I'm going to look forward to, hopefully those experiments are done in the near future and those are written up and shared with the world, because I definitely think with your approach you'll find all types of creative behaviors.
Well, I put as many of them in the book as I could. I really wanted people to see, like that wonderful little horse, and one of the reasons for writing the book was to use up all these good stories I'd accumulated since I wrote Don't Shoot the Dog. And so there's a lot of them in there.
What I love about the book, which I don't think I've experienced this before, you have a companion website. So for each chapter, you read the chapter, and then there may be some suggested readings, or there may be PDF files of articles, but the videos are just priceless. Being able to see these videos after you read, that's the way I handled it, is I would read the chapter, and then after that I would go to the website. But that made the reading experience very pleasurable, and just being able to see that after you read something was very helpful.
That's so much fun, Rick. Can you mention some particular video that you enjoyed that way?
Let's think about this. When I was reading, I think was it the second chapter on shaping, what was the video on? It was with the dolphins, and it was some older footage.
Yeah, there was 2 killer whales doing that double jump.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah, I was so excited when I came across that video. Is almost 50 years old.
Wow.
And I found it. Those two false killers, the tropical killer whale, and it was partly successive approximation. We partly manipulated the jump itself by slacking it in the middle so that they would take the easiest part of the jump, and that brought the two animals close together. Mm-hmm. And it was partly just pure shaping. It was fun for me to put that up there. And then there's the famous fainting fish, too. That video is in there. That's it. Go on.
I was going to say, the other one that just jumped to my mind was the one where you were at the Wolf Park?
Yeah.
And that was just... after reading your book, it convinced me that I need to go in and become certified. I mean, I don't do a lot of animal training, I can say. I don't do much at all, but that's just something that I've committed myself to do, because the book impacted me so much that being able to understand this technology and then bring it into working with kids is a way that will help me become a better teacher. So, but the videos were just fabulous.
Oh, that's exciting. And Rick, I'm so happy to hear you say that. I'm so stunned by the sophistication of the people who are going through the course and who have come out the other side with all these tools very well in hand. What they are doing, and it will be wonderful to have you with your background and precision teaching strongly equipped with both the shaping and the behavioral design side that this brings to this will. I mean, I think that's great.
I can't wait to start. I've been thinking too, being someone who publishes quite a bit, there are so many ways to apply this, and we have been applying this to kids, and although I think some of my efforts initially have been a little bit sloppy, so being better educated is something that I'm looking forward to.
Well, you get your tag certification. Is you're talking about that?
Mm-hmm.
I think would be wonderful to have more publications about tag teaching. The more the better, because that's an area where we're pretty thin on the ground with evidence.
Yes.
So with data would be just because, as we both know well, publishing in the scientific literature is an awful job.
Yes. Well, and two, the people who are using the technology, their main interest isn't necessarily to, oh, this is great, let's go share this with the scientific community. It works. It did what I want it to do. They're happy.
That's it. That's very true. Yeah, they don't need to publish, and they don't need to prove themselves because they're using it in their work, and that's what they need. But so that it'd be wonderful to have some good data in the literature. That would be very exciting. Very exciting.
Let me ask you this: what's next for you? So you have the book. Are you doing book tours and conferences?
Somewhat. The book came out last June, so It's been about a year. And over that year, first of all, I've just been kicking up my heels and enjoying myself because it was 4 years of nose to the grindstone writing. And I didn't go to the movies. I didn't take the weekends off. It was just horrible. So I've been enjoying this year, and I have been giving papers and going to conferences and doing some book promotion, doing some lecturing, particularly in the zoo world. But after that, I can see that that's kind of settling down now. The paperback came out in June, so that means that more people are using it in course adoption, and I'm not sure what comes next. I know I never want to write another book.
Yeah.
Honestly, so much is coming up since the book came out that's new, that I'm sure that more writing and speaking is on the horizon, very much so. Very much so. Meanwhile, I have a whole slew of, I have 3 grandchildren, graduate, 1 from college and 2 from high school this year. My family is just getting bigger and bigger, so I have a lot of family obligations. Mm-hmm. And then where this company is growing, we have 200 certified. We have about 200 certified tag teachers and 200 certified dog teachers out there teaching right now, and they all deserve some attention too. So, and many more going through the program. So that's kind of keeping me busy too. And I'm not sure where it goes from here. I just know that there's still a lot more questions.
Well, we're towards the end of our interview. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't, or anything you'd like to say or talk about that we hadn't talked about?
See, I've been running my mouth off here without letting you get a question in edgewise.
No, that's what these interviews are about, listening to you, not me.
Well, it's been a joy, and I thank you so much for the chance to talk to a Precision Teaching audience. I'm very happy. Hi, folks.
Well, on behalf of my audience and the audience who attend the podcast, who listen to it, are not necessarily all precision teachers. I want my audience, and what I'm getting feedback for, are the people who are interested in operant technology. So you'll get just the audience is growing. So I can't help but admire you for 4 years of the book, and just though your whole career has been so inspiring, and it's been just a wonderful honor for you to speak with me. So thank you very much for your time.
Well, it's been an honor for me, Rick. Thank you so much for setting it up and all of the technology that I learned in the process.
Well, thank you for joining the Precision Teaching Podcast.
Doug, I told you it would be a fantastic interview, and I don't lie, do I?
Not usually on Thursday.
That's true.
There you go.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have anything else to say. This has been a good, illuminating podcast. Do you have anything else that we forgot to talk about?
No, I look forward to our next one, and send those questions.
Okay. On behalf of Doug Kosowitz, I'm Rick Cabina, and thank you for listening to the Precision Teaching Podcast.